This is a hobby author publishing presentation, where my hobby is your entertainment.
Welcome back to Shadows of Secrets, a city choked by corruption, a villain who rules from the shadows. For Gerrod, the search for his mother has become entangled in a war for Oswegonia's soul. The whispers of the Shadow Myster are everywhere. But how does one fight an enemy with no face? The answer lies in the lifeblood of the city, the guilds. Today, in Chapter 4, The Guild's Grip, Gerrod pulls at the threads of the conspiracy, uncovering a web of greed, exploitation, and fear that runs deeper than he could ever have imagined. But the more he uncovers, the closer the shadows get.
Chapter 4, The Guild's Grip. A low voice drifted from the next table. Lord Halvren's men don't ask no more. They take. Gerrod stilled, fingers tightening around the mug. The speaker, a wiry man with a crooked nose, leaned close to his companion, his voice rough with fear. Took my brother's mill, said it was tax. Bastards laughed as they hauled him off. Gerrod lifted the mug to his lips, feigning a slow sip. Warm, stale ale coated his tongue. He swallowed past the bitterness, his pulse steady. The tavern's candlelight flickered against soot-stained beams, casting jagged shadows. Nearby, a drunk slumped over a table, snoring softly. The man at the next table spat. Ain't just coin no more. They took Elsha's girl, barely 14. A chair scraped against the rough wooden floor. Gerrod didn't look, but his hand drifted beneath his cloak, fingers brushing the hilt of his knife. His breath came slow, measured. Pieces of the puzzle clicked into place. Tax seizures, disappearances, unchecked power. Corruption wasn't creeping. It was rooted deep, spreading. The drunk stirred, a single glassy eye fixed on Gerrod. A little too sharp, a little too aware. Gerrod set his mug down and rose. Time to leave. Rain dripped from sagging rooftops, tracing thin rivulets down soot-streaked walls. The air reeked of mildew and rotting waste. Gerrod moved through the gloom, each step careful, measured. A cat hissed from the shadows, its yellow eyes gleaming before it vanished beneath a broken cart. He paused beneath a crooked archway, unfurling the scrap of parchment. Ink smudged under his calloused fingers, but the meaning remained clear. Names, places, whispered accusations. Lord Halvren's reach spread further than he'd feared. A door creaked open down the alley. Gerrod melted into the darkness, breath held. A heavy-set man staggered out, cursing as he fumbled with his belt. The stink of ale rolled off him in waves. Gerrod waited. The man finished, muttered something about unpaid debts, then lurched away. Gerrod exhaled. He moved again, deeper into the maze of alleys, his path leading toward the market district. More eyes, more whispers. A risk, but necessary. A distant bell tolled. Midnight. Behind him, soft footsteps followed where none should be. The footsteps behind him halted. Silence stretched, thick as the damp night air. Gerrod slipped into a recessed doorway, pressing his back against cold stone. He unrolled the map just enough to study its charred remains. Faint ink lines twisted across the parchment, a labyrinth of forgotten paths. A single name remained unscorched. Halvren. A whisper of movement. Gerrod dropped the map into his cloak and pivoted. His knife flashed free, glinting in the dim alley light. A shadow lunged. He sidestepped, hooking a foot behind his attacker's ankle. They stumbled. Gerrod slammed them against the wall, forearm pinning their throat. A gasp, a sharp intake of breath. Not a soldier. Too small, too thin. A girl. She squirmed, dark eyes wide, face half hidden by a tattered hood. Dirt streaked her cheeks. She smelled of smoke and river water. Who sent you? Gerrod's voice came low, steady. She bared her teeth like a cornered fox. No one. He loosened his grip just enough. Then why follow? Her fingers clenched around something. He caught a glint of steel. A knife. She drove it toward his ribs. Gerrod twisted, knocking her wrist against the alley wall. The blade clattered to the cobblestones. She hissed, clutching her hand, but didn't run. You're fast, Gerrod muttered, kicking the knife aside. But not fast enough. She glared, breath ragged. Didn't mean to kill you, just needed your coin. Gerrod frowned. A common thief wouldn't have followed him so deliberately. That why you were tracking me? She hesitated, then shook her head. Saw you at the tavern. Heard you asking questions." Her eyes flicked toward the parchment tucked in his cloak. "You want Halvren gone?" Gerrod studied her. "Thin, but not weak. Desperate, but not broken. I want the truth." She wiped her nose on her sleeve. "Then you're looking in the right places." Gerrod didn't press further. Instead, he retrieved the knife and flipped it in his palm, hilt first. She snatched it back, eyes wary. "Come with me," he said, "if you're serious." She considered, then gave a small nod. The candle sputtered, its glow barely holding back the dim press of the room. Gerrod ignored the flickering light, his focus locked on the ledgers before him. Ink-stained pages whispered as he turned them, columns of figures forming a web of deceit. Taxes bled merchants dry, seized properties changed hands overnight. Coin funneled into noble pockets while commoners drowned in debt. By the door, the girl lingered, shifting her weight against the warped frame. She hadn't run after the alley, hadn't stabbed him when he let her keep her knife. Instead, she had followed, silent but watching. Now, she studied the parchment with wary eyes. "You just gonna stare at numbers all night?" Her voice cut through the quiet, sharp with doubt. Gerrod's gaze didn't leave the page. "Numbers tell stories. You just have to know how to read them." She scoffed, arms crossing over her chest. "Stories don't mean much if no one listens." Now, he looked at her. Small, but not frail. Dirty, but not broken. A survivor. "You know these names?" He tapped a column. She hesitated, her fingers curled against the doorframe. "Some." Gerrod slid a blank scrap of parchment toward her. "Then start talking." She didn't move right away, only watching him, weighing something unspoken. Then slowly, she stepped forward. Gerrod's eyes narrowed as he flipped through another page. The numbers were the same, seemingly innocuous at first glance, but there was a pattern, a deliberate rhythm to the shifts. Merchants bribed, guilds silenced, trade routes diverted. His fingers traced the columns, each entry weaving into the next with careful precision. It wasn't just theft, it was control, a system of manipulation that ran through the heart of Oswegonia. The pieces clicked into place. Halvren wasn't just a figurehead. He was the architect, the one pulling every string from the shadows. The guilds, once independent, now bound together by corruption, each complicit in feeding the beast that had grown too large to dismantle easily. Gerrod gritted his teeth. The scale of it sickened him, but it sharpened his resolve. He wasn't just chasing rumors. This wasn't a simple power grab. This was a war for the city's soul. The girl shifted behind him, her eyes darting over his shoulder. He glanced at her once, but returned his focus to the ledgers. "You know the guilds?" She didn't answer immediately, but he caught the briefest flicker of recognition in her gaze. "I know their names," she muttered. Gerrod flipped to the next page, the worn leather creaking beneath his touch. The ink was faded but still legible, and as he studied the entries, a pattern emerged. Shipbuilding contracts, details of shipments, supply chain disruptions were clearly manipulated. The Shipwrights Guild had imposed strict limitations on independent builders, restricting their access to raw materials and setting inflated prices for supplies. His fingers tightened around the journal. Each entry was a deliberate act of sabotage, designed to cripple smaller, independent shipyards. The Guild had cornered the market, leaving little room for competition, forcing builders to either sell out or starve. The implication hit him hard. It wasn't just power being hoarded, it was a calculated effort to impoverish those who might challenge Halvren's grip on the city. Without independent builders, without competition, the Guild could control every aspect of the trade. Ships didn't just sail, they carried Halvren's will. Gerrod's jaw clenched. This wasn't just about gold. This was about keeping the people in check, keeping them dependent on a system designed to crush them. A low breath from the doorway. The girl watched him, her gaze sharp. "This," Gerrod muttered, his voice low, "isn't just about money. It's about control." Gerrod crouched down, his eyes meeting hers, as she sat against the crumbling wall of the decaying neighborhood. Her cloak, worn and threadbare, offered little protection against the biting wind that whipped through the narrow alley. The smell of rotting wood and wet stone clung to the air, and the faint murmurs of the city seemed a world away. He studied her quietly, noting the dirt streaked across her face, the exhaustion that lined her features. She was young, too young for the hardness in her eyes. He kept his voice calm and respectful, offering a quiet invitation instead of demanding answers. "You know anything about the ships leaving this place?" he asked, his tone even. "When they leave, where they go?" The girl hesitated, her fingers nervously fiddling with the frayed edges of her cloak. Her gaze flickered over him, then quickly dropped, as though unsure whether to trust him. But Gerrod's patience kept her from pulling away. "They leave at night," she murmured, her voice low. "Big ships. Don't come back till morning. They take things they don't want anyone knowing about." Gerrod leaned in slightly, his voice steady. "What kind of things?" She glanced around quickly, her breath catching in her chest. For a moment, it seemed like she might stay silent, but then her eyes met his, and in a soft, almost reluctant whisper, she answered. "Gold. And people. The kind that don't come back." Gerrod leaned in, his expression focused as the girl spoke, her voice small but filled with a quiet urgency. The street around them was still, the sounds of the market barely a murmur in the distance. She shifted uncomfortably, but continued, her eyes flickering to the ground. "The Bakers' Guild," she said. "They got control over all the grain. Prices go up, bread gets scarce. They don't care. They just sell what's left to the rich." Gerrod's jaw tightened. He knew the guilds had their claws in everything, but hearing it from her, hearing how it strangled the people on the ground, made it sharper, more real. "How much for a loaf?" he asked, keeping his voice even, his tone gentle to coax her to say more. She glanced up at him, her lip curling slightly in a bitter smile. "A silver or two if you want a full one, but even if you got the coin, they'll only give you what they got left. It's all about who you know, not who you are." Gerrod nodded slowly, his gaze softening. "And your family?" The girl swallowed, looking away, her small hands clutching at the hem of her cloak. "We had to sell my sister's apprenticeship token just to buy half a loaf. It was all we could get. The guilds got everyone in their pocket." A deep frown settled across Gerrod's face. He wasn't just hearing the words. He could feel the weight of her loss, the weight of the injustice that gripped the city. Gerrod stood in the dimly lit corner of the small, rundown house, listening intently as the widow's voice trembled with grief. Her hands, rough from years of labor, clutched a faded shawl tightly around her shoulders. The room smelled of stale bread and unwashed linen, the air thick with sorrow. "They took everything," she whispered, her voice breaking as she wiped away a tear. "My husband worked his whole life, made those tools with his own hands. The Carpenters' Guild came in the day after he died, said they had the right to claim them, said they were property of the guild." Gerrod's gaze darkened, his jaw clenching. He stepped closer, his voice low but steady. "And you couldn't stop them?" The widow shook her head, her eyes burning with frustration. "What could I do? I'm just a woman, alone. They said if I didn't hand them over, they'd take the house too. They don't care." Her hands twisted the shawl tighter. He spent his life building things, real things, and they just took it all. Said they'd honor his memory by using the tools, but it's all a lie. They just want more power. Gerrod's heart tightened with the weight of her words. The injustice was palpable. The exploitation of vulnerable families by the guilds was suffocating. His resolve hardened like iron. "They'll pay for this," he muttered under his breath. The weight of the widow's grief and anger fueled his determination to expose the truth behind their exploitation. Gerrod stepped through the narrow streets, his eyes scanning the faces that passed him. The usual warmth he'd once found in the people of Oswegonia was gone. Now he saw only cold, guarded expressions. Faces turned away as he approached, eyes flickering with nervous glances. The tension in the air was palpable, a wall of fear that hung over the city like a dark cloud. The market square was quieter than usual, whispers and hushed conversations replaced by the clatter of carts and the rustle of goods. Merchants clutched their wares a little tighter, avoiding eye contact. The slightest movement seemed to trigger suspicion, like even a glance could be misinterpreted. A child, no older than 7, passed by him with her head down, clutching a bundle of cloth to her chest. Her eyes darted quickly to Gerrod, then away, her shoulders stiff with the weight of something unsaid. It wasn't just the usual fear of poverty or crime. This was deeper, darker. Fear of something invisible, something all-encompassing. The Shadow Myster's presence was felt in every corner. His reach extended far beyond the guilds. Gerrod clenched his fists, the anger rising like a storm inside him. Trust was a currency long spent, and the city's people had learned to keep their secrets close. No one dared speak openly, not unless they were ready to disappear. The Shadow Myster ruled with an unseen hand, suffocating the city in his grip. Gerrod sat hunched over the cluttered table, his brow furrowed in concentration. Pages of scrawled notes, hastily written testimonies, and maps were spread out before him. Each line he drew, each note he penned, connected one story to the next. The pieces of the puzzle were scattered, fragmented, but he could see the whole picture starting to emerge. He paused for a moment, fingers pressing against his temples, trying to sort through the growing web of corruption. A widow's tools, a merchant's broken promises, a ship disappearing into the night. The voices of the oppressed, those who had been silenced, whose lives had been crushed under the weight of the guild's greed, echoed in his mind. His quill scratched across the page, linking another name to a new clue. The lines on his notebook intersected, crisscrossing and weaving together. A network of exploitation, all leading back to one source, the Shadow Myster's hand. The candlelight flickered, casting long shadows over the room, but Gerrod's focus didn't waver. The connections were clear now. Every testimony, every small truth he had gathered was a thread in the larger tapestry. His grip on the quill tightened. The truth was within reach, and he would follow the lines wherever they led, no matter the cost. Gerrod's eyes narrowed as his fingers hovered over the fresh ink, tracing the lines that connected one piece of evidence to another. The names, the faces, the stories, they all started to align, like pieces of a map leading him toward a singular, horrifying truth. The Shadow Myster was no mere figure of whispered fear. He was an architect of misery, a man whose very presence was a poison in the veins of Oswegonia. Each line he connected in the notebook revealed another layer of manipulation, another calculated move in the grand scheme of oppression. The Myster didn't simply thrive on power, he suffocated it. Hope, ambition, trust, they were all crushed under the weight of his influence, one crushing decision at a time. Gerrod's breath came heavier as the truth solidified before him. The Myster wasn't just a leader of the guilds. He was the hand that guided the chains, the puppet master, pulling at the strings of every merchant, every worker, every family. No one was untouched. The darkness that clung to the city now felt suffocating. Gerrod's jaw tightened, and his hand gripped the quill harder. There was no turning back. He would expose the Myster for what he was, no matter the cost. His fingers traced the final connecting line, sealing the fate of everything he had uncovered. Rylan's voice was low, cautious as he leaned closer to Gerrod, his eyes darting around the dimly lit room to ensure no one overheard. The flicker of candlelight cast sharp shadows across his face, highlighting the tension in his expression. "You're looking at it all wrong," Rylan said, his tone firm but quiet. "The guilds aren't some unified front. They're fractured, broken into factions, each one pulling in a different direction. You've got the Carpenters Guild battling the Masons, the shipwrights hoarding their power while the bakers bicker over bread. It's chaos beneath the surface, Gerrod. It's a mess." Gerrod frowned, trying to follow Rylan's words. He had always seen the guilds as a single force of corruption, a united body of greed. But what Rylan said made sense. He had seen the discord firsthand in the streets, the bickering, the subtle backstabbing. Rylan continued, his voice lowering even further. "That's where the Shadow Myster comes in. He doesn't have to control them all. He just plays the cracks. When one guild's weak, he makes sure another one's ready to take advantage. He pits them against each other, and when they fight, he wins." Gerrod's gaze hardened, realization dawning. He's playing them against each other. Rylan nodded. Exactly. He's the puppet master, using their own greed and fear to turn them into weapons, all while staying in the shadows. It's how he stays untouchable. Gerrod's mind raced as he pieced it together. The Myster didn't need to conquer the guilds. He needed only to exploit their fractures, manipulate their flaws, and watch them destroy themselves. Rylan's fingers traced slow, deliberate patterns across the scarred wooden table, the creaking of the old surface filling the silence between them. His eyes never left Gerrod, but his movements betrayed his unease. Each line he drew was meticulous, like a puzzle he was unwilling to finish, or perhaps a map he was too afraid to reveal. The nerves beneath his calm facade were thinly veiled, and Gerrod caught the slight tremor in his hand. The flickering candlelight caught the edges of Rylan's fingers as they glided over the table, tracing circles and loops, his touch faint but purposeful. The patterns were more than idle doodles. They were a language, a code of some kind. Gerrod could feel the weight of each gesture, the pauses, the slight hesitation before his fingers moved again. Rylan's gaze shifted for a brief moment, his eyes narrowing with calculation, as though weighing each word he had yet to speak. Gerrod noticed how the air between them seemed to grow heavier with each passing second, the tension rising like a tide. His eyes never left Rylan's hand. "What aren't you telling me?" Gerrod's voice was low, but it carried the sharp edge of someone who had seen too many lies unfold. Rylan's movements faltered, then resumed, his fingers still tracing patterns, but now with an underlying tension that suggested the weight of a secret too dangerous to keep. Rylan's hand stilled on the table, his fingers lingering over a half-formed circle, as if the words he was about to speak weighed more than the silence that followed. His gaze flickered to the door, then back to Gerrod, his voice dropping even lower. "There are some," he began, carefully choosing his words, younger ones, still remember when the guilds meant something more than profit. Gerrod's brows furrowed, the sudden shift in Rylan's tone catching his attention. "What do you mean?" Rylan's eyes met his, sharper now, as if the spark of a new thought had ignited something inside him. Before the Myster turned everything into a game of control and money, there were those who actually believed in the work. They took pride in it, felt it was more than just filling their pockets. But now, it's all about the guilds. The power, the profit, the corruption. The rest of us are just tools to be used and thrown away. Gerrod leaned forward slightly, the air thick with the possibility of something more. And these younger members? They're still there. A few, Rylan continued, his voice laced with a quiet urgency. They're lost in it, but they remember. They know what it could be. Some of them are even starting to see through the shadows. If we had their help. His voice trailed off, the implication hanging in the air like a promise. The idea flickered in Gerrod's mind, a tremor of hope amidst the darkness. Allies, inside the very system that seemed invulnerable. It was a dangerous thought, but a powerful one. The revolution could start from within. Rylan's lips twisted into a bitter smile, the humor in his laugh hollow and strained. "Some of us haven't completely surrendered our dignity," he muttered, his voice laced with venom. The candlelight flickered, casting sharp shadows across his face, accentuating the barely contained fury simmering beneath his calm exterior. His eyes flashed with something raw, something dangerous, an old fire, long buried but not yet extinguished. Gerrod felt it then, the shift in the air, like a storm gathering just beyond the horizon. The anger in Rylan's words was more than just frustration. It was a call to something deeper, something long suppressed. There was power in that fury, a driving force that had been waiting for the right spark. Gerrod's fingers tightened around the edge of his chair, his breath steady, but his heart racing. The weight of the moment pressed down on him. All at once, everything seemed clearer. The tangled web of lies, the fractured guilds, the hope buried beneath layers of corruption. Rylan's words rang in his mind, their meaning sinking deeper into him. This wasn't just about exposing the truth anymore. This was about restoring dignity, about giving back what had been stolen, not just from the people, but from the guilds themselves. It was about something bigger than revenge. It was about a reckoning, a new fire ignited within him, sharper than any he'd felt before. His purpose had crystallized. The time for shadows was ending. It was time for the light to break through. Gerrod and Rylan locked eyes, the unspoken understanding passing between them like a current. For a moment, everything else faded. The flickering candlelight, the creaking of the old table beneath their hands, the tension in the room. It was as though the air itself held its breath, waiting for the decision that would alter everything. No words were needed. They both knew the path they were about to walk was fraught with danger. The risk was calculated, delicate. Every step would need to be measured, every ally chosen with care, every move a step in a complex, fragile dance. Yet neither hesitated. Rylan's expression softened just enough to reveal the weight of years spent hiding his true intentions. A faint nod passed between them, a silent agreement. This wasn't just about exposing the Shadow Myster anymore. It was about gathering the fractured pieces of the guilds and showing them the power they could have if they chose to stand together. Gerrod felt the enormity of the decision settle into his bones. There would be no going back. But for the first time in a long while, the path ahead seemed clear. His purpose, his mission, aligning with the growing force of rebellion within the guilds. The weight of the decision anchored them both. But there was something else, too. Hope. A flicker that, despite all the shadows, had yet to die. Gerrod extended his hand, his fingers brushing against the roughened surface of the table, where Rylan's hand had already begun to move. Without a word, their palms met, firm and resolute, the weight of the moment settling between them. The grip was steady, the kind of handshake that spoke louder than any promise. It wasn't just an agreement, it was a covenant. The trust that passed through their clasped hands was fragile, built not on years of friendship, but on a shared understanding of the stakes. They didn't need to say much. Their hands, calloused and worn from their own battles, told the story. An unspoken pact forged from the knowledge that they were both risking everything, trusting in the knowledge that they were not alone in this fight. Gerrod's fingers tightened, a silent vow in the strength of his grip. Rylan's hand held firm, the edges of his resolve sharpening in the connection. There was a delicate balance in this alliance, frail threads woven together by necessity, but stronger for it. They were bound by the same purpose now, their fates tied to each other and to the revolution that was quietly brewing. The silence stretched, but there was no need for words. In that moment, they understood the cost and the weight of what lay ahead. And as they slowly released, the spark of something bigger, something unstoppable, burned between them. Rylan pulled his hand back slowly, his eyes steady as he regarded Gerrod. "I can give you access," he said, his voice low, carrying a weight that suggested he understood the depth of what he was offering. "The guilds, documents, meetings, whispers, everything they've kept hidden. You want the truth? I can help you find it." Gerrod nodded, his own gaze unflinching. "And I'll offer you something you don't have yet," he replied, his voice calm but firm. Perspective, how to move within their world without falling into their traps, how to see the big picture, not just the pieces they let you see. The air between them crackled with the tension of a fragile but necessary alliance. They were stepping into a world where every word, every gesture could be weaponized. Their positions were delicate, each one offering something the other needed, but each taking on a dangerous gamble. Rylan's lips twisted into a half-smile, a glint of respect and perhaps wariness in his eyes. "Calculated risk," he muttered, as if tasting the words. "We'll have to be careful. A wrong move, and it all falls apart." Gerrod met his gaze, understanding the unspoken challenge between them, one step at a time. And so the dance began. Two men caught in a rhythm of secrets, revelations, and the faintest hope that together they might rewrite the rules of a broken system. Rylan's fingers skimmed the edge of a worn leather map, the parchment frayed at the corners from years of use. His touch was deliberate, almost reverent, tracing the outlines of the city, the intricate web of streets, alleys, and landmarks that held Oswegonia together. Each mark on the map told a story, but it was the spaces between them that had the most weight. He paused, his gaze lingering on a spot, one of many weak points hidden in plain sight. Gerrod watched him, his green eyes steady, their depths reflecting the steely determination that had settled within him. There was no doubt now, no hesitation. The time for quiet observation had passed. He understood what needed to be done, and the enormity of the task ahead didn't falter his resolve. The city, vibrant and unaware, continued to breathe, its pulse steady and unbroken. But beneath its surface, the foundations were beginning to shift, trembling in response to forces they couldn't yet understand. Gerrod knew it, felt it in his bones. The guilds, the Shadow Myster, none of them knew what was coming. The cracks in the system were widening, and soon the city would have no choice but to notice. The question wasn't if the city would change, but how it would survive the storm they were about to unleash.
The guild's grip is absolute, choking the city from within. But within that suffocating darkness, a spark of rebellion has been struck. Gerrod has found an ally in Rylan, a man who sees the cracks in the Myster's empire. They have a plan, a dangerous alliance born of desperation. But can a handful of dissidents truly challenge a power that controls everything? And what sacrifices will be required to light the flame of rebellion? Find out next time in Chapter 5, Rebellion's Awakening. Don't miss the start of the uprising. Subscribe and join the resistance.